Rabbi Michael Zedek is our presenter. He has been a wonderful addition to our life together. He was here yesterday morning and did a couple of hours of how rabbis look at the scripture. Particularly, we looked at Genesis and Exodus, had a fascinating time. He spoke again this morning in worship. He's had quite a distinguished career. He's led two of the most well-known and largest congregations in the United States, one in Kansas City and one in Chicago. He's worked for Jewish Federation. He's an advisor to, I always forget the name of it, the Central Conference of American Rabbis, which is a rabbinical association. He's got a couple of daughters. He's got 4 grandkids. They live on each coast, so he gets to travel coast to coast to see the grandchildren. He's been a wonderful guest here. He's interacted with several of you, I know, who are able to come earlier. He's got 2 more presentations for us. The one tonight on miracles. He's working on a book. Still working on the book. The book is with the agent, going to the publisher. I would have loved to have had it here for you tonight because I'm sure after you hear him, you'd love to read more about his insights. He's a wise and insightful person. He's been wonderful for us to be here. Behind me, you see the 13th Street Band. You recognize Joel Pansera in the middle. These have been our musicians in this room at 10 o'clock on Sunday morning for our 13th Street worship service. They're going to lead us in a couple of songs as we get started this evening, and then we'll go from there. Would you bow with me in prayer? Oh, God, we do give you thanks for your great love of us, for this fellowship tonight, for the learning that we are participating in, for the way that we're connected in community, for recognizing your awe and wonder and presence in the ordinary, as the rabbi reminded us this morning. We give you thanks for all of it. We pray your blessings upon him as he leads us this evening. And let the people say, amen.
Scholars think it was in the early 7th century. The tune that we know that we sing is also an Irish folk tune, very, very old. And I think one of the reasons that the poem is so beloved is that way, that kind of Celtic kind of idea of the lots of burning bushes. You know, when you think of the Celtic culture and seeing God in creation. So be thou my, all the different ways that we experience God, my vision, my wisdom, my presence, my light, my heart, my treasure, my best thought. So it's a wonderful song that we all know that we can sing together. Just a couple warnings. We're going to do it in a kind of Celtic folk style. There'll be some transitions, so follow these 4. They'll bring you in and out. Let's stand and sing Be Thou My Vision. The second song, really quickly, we're going to go right into the second song. You can sit for this one. It's more of a kind of modern gospel song that's a little bit more rock-oriented, but is also very beautiful, called Your Spirit. Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart, not be all else to
our song. You are our God, we are your people. You are the light, we stand in awe. We stand in awe of you. We stand in awe of you. Not by might, not by power, by your Spirit, God, in your Spirit, God. Not by might, not by power, by your Spirit, God, in your Spirit, God. You called us out of the darkness into your love, into your light. Grace upon grace, beauty for ashes. You come to us, we come alive. We stand in awe of you. We stand in awe of you. Not by might, not by power, by your Spirit, God, in your Spirit, God. Not by might, not by power, by your Spirit, God, in your Spirit, God. Not by might, not by power, by your Spirit, God, in your Spirit, God. Not by might, not by power, by your Spirit, God, in your Spirit, God. Breathe, come and breathe on us, Spirit, breathe, Spirit, breathe on us. Breathe, come and breathe on us, Spirit, breathe, Spirit, breathe on us. We stand in awe of you. We stand in awe of you. Not by might, not by power, by your Spirit, God, in your Spirit, God. Breathe, come and breathe on us, Spirit, breathe, Spirit, breathe on us. Breathe, come and breathe on us, Spirit, breathe, Spirit, breathe on us. Not by might, not by power, by your Spirit, God, in your Spirit, God. Not by might, not by power, by your Spirit, God, in your Spirit, God.
Thank you very much. The next one, if I say the term Beach Street or Beach Spring, sorry, Beach Street. Beach Spring, that might not ring a bell, but as soon as you hear the tune, you'll recognize it. We sing it a lot in church. And so we're going to sing that tune, which is an American folk tune, to the hymn text, As a Fire Was Meant for Burning, which was written by one of my favorite hymn writers, Ruth Duck. She taught at Garrett and is one of the leading kind of progressive hymn writers. And there's so many images in it that we've talked about already, the rabbi has talked about, I should say. And it's all about how all life is connected, the connectedness and the kind of unity of all life. So let's stand and sing As a Fire Was Meant for Burning.
As a fire is meant for burning with a bright and warming flame, so the church is meant for mission, giving glory to God's name. Not to preach our creeds or customs, but to build a bridge of care. We join hands across the nations, finding neighbors everywhere. We are learners, we are teachers, we are pilgrims on the way. We are seekers, we are givers, we are vessels made of clay. By our gentle, loving actions, we would show that God is right. In a humble, listening spirit, we would live to God's delight. As a green bud in the springtime is a sign of life renewed, so may we be signs of oneness, bitter people's many head. As a rainbow lights the heavens when a storm is past and gone, may our lives reflect the radiance of God's new and glorious dawn.
Rabbi Charles Sherman was going to be with us this evening. He had a toilet overflow in his upstairs. He went to his office this afternoon to grab some things before coming down here and found a flood. So he's not going to be able to join us this evening. Right. It's predictive. Also, our presenter, our introducer, not our presenter, our introducer came down with a throat condition, so he's not going to be able to be here. But I'm going to tell you a couple more things about the rabbi. Then we're going to have one more song by the band, and then he'll be ready to present for us. So I didn't tell you, but he's been doing radio live every Sunday morning for the last 29 years. He got to see our church building and experience our congregation yesterday morning, and he shared with me that he told his radio listening audience, because he did it remotely from Tulsa, he's dedicated. I couldn't believe he didn't skip this morning, but he did it anyway. Told them that this was, what did you tell them? It was the greatest?
It was the most remarkable sacred structure I had ever been in terms of its enhancement of the experience of worship. And then, of course, I emphasized that it was designed by a woman. And one of my colleagues, the only colleague I've had in the entire 29 years of the show that's still with me, he claims his congregation's building was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. Now, Frank Lloyd Wright denied it because they did change the design, and Wright would not tolerate anyone doing anything with his design. But I also added that he would have learned a great deal about design had he come here.
Isn't that nice? So,
I'm done.
yes. kudos to the Coles and Ada Robinson and all those who had anything to do with designing this magnificent structure, and Bruce Goff worked with her. Also, the rabbi is now rabbi in residence at St. Paul School of Theology, which is our United Methodist Seminary in Kansas City, that also has a campus now at our Methodist School, Oklahoma City University here in Oklahoma. So they have students at both campus and do in-person and remote teaching back and forth between the campuses. So he's got a full plate, even though he's retired. He said, well, maybe we should say semi-retired, because he's still doing a lot, obviously writing, speaking, teaching. We're delighted that he made time to be with us this evening. We'll hear the anthem and then turn to you, Reb.
It's a mama singing songs about the Lord. It's a daddy spending family time the world says he cannot afford. These simple moments change the world. It's a pastor at a tiny little church. 40 years of loving on the broken and the hurt. These simple moments change the world. Dream small. Don't buy the lie, you've got to do it all. Just let Jesus use you where you are. One day at a time, live well. Loving God and others as yourself. Find little ways where only you can help. With His great love, a tiny rock can make a giant fall. Dream small. It's visiting the widow down the street, or dancing on a Friday with your friend with special needs. These simple moments change the world. Of course, there's nothing wrong with bigger dreams. Just don't miss the minutes on your way to bigger things. 'Cause these simple moments change the world. So dream small. Don't buy the lie, you've got to do it all. Just let Jesus use you where you are. One day at a time, live well. Loving God and others as yourself. Find little ways where only you can help. With His great love, a tiny rock can make a giant fall. So dream small. Keep loving, keep serving, keep listening, keep learning, keep praying, keep hoping, keep seeking, keep searching. Out of the small things and watch them grow bigger. The God who does all things makes oceans from rivers. So dream small. Don't buy the lie, you've got to do it all. Just let Jesus use you where you are. One day at a time, live well. Loving God and others as yourself. Find little ways where only you can help. With His great love, a tiny rock can make a giant fall. Yeah, 5 loaves and 2 fish can feed them all. So dream small.
Thank you all very, very, very much. I mean, among the many things that seems to be quite extraordinary in this place is the music of the heart and soul. And in fact, there's a comment in the Talmud that words that come from the heart enter the heart, and he who sings prays twice. So it's the easiest method to do it, so why not? A couple of other preliminaries. When you came in, you said shalom to me, right? And I said uvracha, and you want the hello and blessing was my response. But there's another response that's not nearly as well known in terms of how to say goodbye in Hebrew. Don't worry about this. Lahit ra'ot. Okay. It would be translated as see you around, okay? But it literally means until I see myself in you again. And when we've talked about connections, until I see myself in you again, that is, I cannot be I without you, and my I is suffering in some fashion because I am not with you. Richard Leakey of the famous anthropology family, boy, I didn't know we were going to go down this direction, was once asked in a press conference, idiotic, can you summarize everything you've learned in one sentence? Now, instead of saying, what an idiotic query, he said, yes, I can. And it's this: one monkey is no monkey. We live in communities or we cannot survive, let alone thrive. Most Jewish prayer, by the way, is not in the I form. Dear God, please let me get an A in mathematics would not be a traditionally Jewish prayer. First of all, it's unlikely to work if you haven't done the study, and then still it might not, right? Second, a more appropriately Jewish prayer would be, Dear God, please let us get an A in mathematics. And I do want you to know that the A that I'm experiencing is your wonderful embrace and kindness to me. I'd love to imagine I deserve a little bit of it. What the heck? So let's get started, and I've got till 6? Okay, 5:59. Okay. In all seriousness, one of the great challenges I have this evening is this is something I've been working on for a very long time. How am I going to do? Okay, I'll try. Let's start with this tale from Indian folklore. A guru took it upon himself the notion that he had to somehow gain the Buddha's attention. Now, why a guru would need this is a whole other matter, but why ruin a good story with a little fact like that? The guru determined that the way he would succeed in his ambition is if he could somehow learn to walk on water. He practiced for 20 years intense meditation and mindfulness, and lo and behold, he succeeded. He was able to walk on water. He showed the Buddha, and the Buddha's immediate response was, I don't understand. Why didn't you simply take 2 rupees and take the ferry? Similarly, worlds apart, a tale from backlore folklore of West Virginia. A hunter has a new dog, and he's very excited to take on his first hunt. He shoots a duck. Oh, he shoots a duck. And instructs the dog to fetch it, and the dog walks out on the water and brings back the duck. Now, of course, the hunter is nonplussed by this. He's shocked. He puts the dog back in the truck and heads back to town. Next day, he can't help himself. Invites a friend to join him. Same routine. Boom. Walks out, brings it back. No one says a word. Walks out, brings it back. Walks out, brings it back. Until finally the owner of the dog can't withhold himself any longer. He says to his friend, you notice anything peculiar about my dog? And the guy says, yeah, I kind of think about it. The darn thing doesn't know how to swim. Well, among the reasons why I mention that is because, ready? Every single time, no exceptions, every single time in the Hebrew Bible, what you or I would label as a miracle, no one in the story gets the lesson, which, as I've said in the hearing of some of you, has to be the lesson. Let me give you a slight detour to this notion. Many of us are old enough to remember what was sometimes called the golden age of situation comedies on television. Mr. Ed? So if you remember, Mr. Ed was a talking horse, for those of you who don't recall. And when Mr. Ed introduces himself to, are you ready for my one impression I do? Wilbur. Pretty good, right? And if you're wondering it was Alan Young. But at any rate, Wilbur, Alan Young, is nonplussed because it's not in our experience, after all, for horses to talk, let alone have the best lines in a situation comedy, right? But the Hebrew Bible has an exact parallel. Balaam and his, you should forgive the expression, ass, right? Where the donkey talks to him, and without missing any, oh my goodness, they have a conversation as though it were a perfectly normal thing to do. But it's much deeper. Consider the great drama of the Exodus story. Text says it took 10 plagues, right? Wouldn't one have been enough for you to say, this isn't going to work out well? I think I better cut my losses and let the Israelites go. But the text says 10. By the way, in rabbinic tradition, their way of finessing all of this is they say it was thousands of plagues, which is tongue-in-cheek way of saying, watch out, something funny's going on, because every single time in the Hebrew Bible, what you or I would call a miracle occurs, there's a telltale, a sign, a symbol. Pay attention. So let's pay attention. The text says it takes 10 plagues, and Yul Brynner changes his mind, right? The Israelites go out into the wilderness, and Yul Brynner, Pharaoh, let's get the army together. Presumably no firstborn soldiers, no firstborn horses, because they've all been wiped out, according to the story, if you take it literally, and they go after him. Now, we're out in the desert. Edward G. Robinson, who's playing Dothan in the movie version, looks at the dust cloud of the Egyptian tanks, which is what a chariot was the ancient equivalent of, and says, Charlton Heston, why did you bring us out here to die? Weren't there enough graves in Egypt? They're going to say that over and over again, because one thing that they have a great skill at is complaining, right? None of that would happen here. No. So, why'd you bring us out here to die? Moses, according to the text, says, he turns to God, and the text says, God says, why are you crying out to me? Tell the children of Israel to go forward, which may actually be the true miracle in the story, that they go forward. But, as we all know, the sea splits and they walk through on dry ground. There should be mud, folks. There should be mud. But the text says, walk dry ground. Now, if you remember, they're protected while they're crossing by a whirlwind that's keeping the Egyptian army away. The whirlwind disappears. You're an Egyptian chariot driver. You're going to drive in there. You got to be absolutely out of your mind. But the text says, and now here's where, again, a telltale. The Hebrew says, then the children of Israel beheld Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim is the Hebrew word for Egypt, not Egyptians. Egypt dead on the shore of the sea. But here's the bigger then. Then they had, and I'm sorry for the Hebrew, but what the heck, I know it, emunah, which you translate as faith, but it doesn't mean faith. It means confidence. Then they had confidence in God and in Moses, God's servant. Until the next chapter. Why? Why'd you bring us out here to die? We've got no water. Splits the rock, right? By the way, this is one I've done, a camping trip in the Sinai. Sinai consists of three principal geological formations: granite, sandstone, and limestone. If you know anything about limestone, the presence of water penetrates and hollows it out. So they'll give you a geology hammer. You'll open up not enough water for 600,000 men and women and children and cattle, but that's a translation error. It's probably 600 elef, which probably meant 6,000. But let's not worry about that. We're never going to change people's perception of what's going on there. They get water, right? Fine. Everything's good. Next chapter. We've got nothing to eat. Why did you bring us out here to die? Weren't there enough graves in Egypt? In Egypt we had, and I'm quoting, leeks and onions and garlic. And they get, what do they get? Manna, which has got to be the Bible's idea of a sense of humor. The text says, I'm honest, I'm quoting, they called it manna because they looked at it and said, manhu. That's Hebrew for, what is it? I'm serious. Mystery meat? By the way, there are some speculations as to what it was. You want to hear some of them? The oozings of the tamarisk tree, which is a source of protein. Tamarisk trees grow in the Sinai. Here's the bad one. Bird droppings. Now, there is a group in Peru. The principal source of protein in their diet is guano. Not my favorite idea, but nonetheless. The pattern is the point far more than the specific, because what happens next? We have cooked manna, I'm making that part up, every way we can. We're sick of it. We've had it up to here with manna. We want meat. The next day, the camp is surrounded by birds, mistranslated quail, but birds. Now, as it happens, the Sinai is, was, and always likely will be, if birds continue to survive our planet and our distortion of it, one of the world's great flyways. The birds have been flying over the Mediterranean. There are very few rest stops. They plop down in this essentially uninhabited area, which is why they're there, resting because they're either on their way to Africa or getting ready to go to Europe. You could literally pick them up and pop them in the oven. Pattern. They get to Mount Sinai. And God, in what is the single greatest personal appearance in all of human history, speaks to the entire community. What do they do next? They build a golden calf. Now, either these are the dumbest people to ever walk the face of the earth, or there's clearly something deeper going on in these texts. Now, there might be a few people, Dr. Biggs and Reverend Wiggs, who subscribe to the notion with me that there's something far deeper going on here. So, for instance, Dr. Martin Luther King's unpacking of the text was, these texts demonstrate that it is easier to get the slaves out of Egypt than it is to get Egypt out of the slaves. Now, that is always true. In every movement for liberation, writ large or small, we are free before we are able to embrace the gift and recognition that we are free. I subscribe to another notion as well, and it's this. We are free to disbelieve the evidence of our own experience. I want to say that one again. We are free to disbelieve the evidence of our own experience. I mentioned earlier, days pass, years vanish, and we walk sightless among miracles. I know that is true about me, and I'm going to make the leap that there may be others for whom it's true as well, maybe even some in this room. I'm going to take a look at my notes. Part of the challenge is what we mean when we say the word miracle. If I asked you for a definition, you're very likely to include the word supernatural intervention in your reflection. Fair? Yeah. Would it surprise you? I hope it may surprise you that there is no such word in Hebrew for that meaning of miracle. Now, there are words that are translated as miracle, but they don't mean a supernatural intervention into the regular routine of experience. To the board. The three most common words that we translate as miracle are nes, which means a sign or a symbol, ot, which is literally the word for a letter, like the letter of the alphabet. It means a sign, because that's what letters are. And pele, which is my favorite, because pele means a wow. What isn't a wow, theoretically? In short, we are endlessly, what shall we say, bifurcating the world into the natural and the supernatural. But if we were to recognize perhaps another way of framing, there's nothing but wonder. There's nothing but miracle. For biblical, so actually, this is something I wrote. For biblical tradition, miracles as discrete events may be an illusion, one that blinds us to the allusion, one always present, even as we are not always alert to it, namely, that the most intimate and the wholly infinite are one. I like that phrase, and maybe I'm a little too fond of it. The most intimate and the wholly infinite are one. Anybody remember Willa Cather, Death Comes for the Archbishop? Yeah. Too few of us, you know. Yeah. So this is from her book. Miracles seem to me to rest not so much upon faces or voices or healing power coming suddenly near to us from afar, but upon our perceptions being made finer, so that for a moment our eyes can see and our ears can hear what is there about us always. What is there about us always. Einstein was even more specific. Great theologian, by the way. He said, there are only two ways to live. The first is as though nothing is a miracle. The second is as though everything is a miracle. And I honestly think it is possible, and if my manuscript ever sees the light of day, never to be made into a major motion picture, I promise. But it is possible to get closer to the second way, a miracle. I mentioned the name Isaac Bashevis Singer in the first talk, the Nobel Prize-winning author. In an interview he gave near the end of his life, he said the following. The first, I hope you'll be amused by. I think it's only an amusement. The second is deeper. The 20th century, he said, is a complete flop. The poor want to be rich, the rich wish to be happy, the single want to be married, and the married want to be dead. He went on in a more serious vein. For me, everything is still mysterious, even the most natural things. When I throw a stone and it falls back to earth, I know that is gravity, but isn't that a great mystery? Just because you have seen a thing 10 times, should it stop being mysterious? A writer gave me once a story about a head that was chopped off and could still talk. But isn't it marvelous enough that a man with a head can talk? So let's talk. Because the greatest challenge to what I'm suggesting is Moses in the burning bush. Fair? What would you say if someone came in today and said, you know, I was out in the parking lot and one of the bushes was on fire. It was on fire but not burning up, and it talked to me. It talked to me. Now here's our options likely. One, if we could, we'd try to find a bed in a hospital. But more likely in current environments, we'd put them on television and send outrageous sums of money to them. You know that a little too well in Tulsa's history. Slight reference. But in all seriousness, how can we understand what's going on in that episode? Here is a religious naturalist exposition. The text suggests it's toward the end of the day in the desert, in a pure environment without pollution, something that we're not used to, alas. Sunset in the desert. The sky is, as it were, ablaze in hues that are far beyond the mastery of any human artist. Moses has an experience, that much we can articulate, that changes his life. Everybody agree? For sure. So, forgive I never did well in art. Here's the sunset. No, that one's not a good one. Here's the sunset. Here's some kind of bush. What kind of bush would it be? We know for sure, by the way. What kind of bush would it be? No, a bush. It's a bush. It's not a tree. An olive is a tree. But it's a gnarly thorn bush. It has to be. Because vegetation adapts to its environment. Why does it have thorns? In order to minimize what it's going to lose to the animal life in order to survive itself. It's going to have small leaves to minimize evaporation. Fair? Clearly. So here's his bush. Here's Moses. I'll give him a beard. He sees this experience. And it was that, now I'm adding, of course. It was as if the bush were on fire and it wasn't consumed. How would you know a bush is on fire and it's not being consumed? Literally. How would you know? Because our experience, if we saw a bush on fire, would be, it's on fire, right? But how can it be both on fire and not be consumed? Well, that would be the but how would you know that? Because at the first glance, you would presumably say, oh, it's on fire. And without some intervention, it's going to be consumed. That's what fire does. That's our understanding of it. But a bush that burning and not burning may be a symbol more than a fact, in terms of fact in specific, but a truth in depth. Because what happens is, here we got Moses. He's safe in the Sinai suburbs. He's married to the boss's daughter. He's going to inherit the family business. And he throws it all away to go back into Egypt to liberate a people who aren't even going to be grateful. Why? Because presumably he understands that he cannot be safe while the people he understands that are part of him and he is part of them are burning up in the fiery furnace that is Egypt. By the way, that's what the Bible refers to. Egypt is a kor habarzel. That's a fancy schmancy Hebrew word for a fiery furnace. It's not an accident that this serves at just about every Holocaust memorial as a symbol for the Jewish people. Burnt in history, but not consumed to finality. By the way, I have a friend who spent many years in New England, and he's come up with an experiment. How can you tell something is burning and not burning up? It takes approximately 7 minutes before you can tell the log is losing some of its substance. The deeper thing is that Moses is Moses and you and I aren't, because Moses, as the text says, turns aside to see this sight. He pays attention. He has an attention span that may be greater than the normal, or whatever the normal means. So we know this much. He changes his life. That is unquestionable, as he launches a moment that continues to impact in extraordinary ways, even including in the battle that's going on right now in Ukraine, for the ongoing march of freedom and all those who would resist it. There's an exquisite midrash, one of my favorites. It says, not a single blade of grass can grow unless the angel for that blade of grass whispers to it, grow, grow, grow. Now, I honestly don't think there's an angel for every blade of grass. But I do think, and I hope, you and I have had moments like that, where life has a clarity and coherence that simply conveys to us the ground upon which we walk is holy, is holy. As I mentioned earlier, only part of Elizabeth Barrett Browning's poem, earth's crammed with heaven, and every bush is afire with God, but only he who sees takes off his shoes. And the line I didn't use this morning, while others just sit round and pluck blackberries. Now, my point being that when you're just plucking blackberries, oh boy, it is a burning bush. So, poets know this in a depth way, even as music conveys it in a remarkable way. So, this poem. Oh, give thanks that spring will always come to make the heart leap, that your winter ear remembers the summer song, and autumn colors return to the jaded eye. Oh, make song for lucid air of morning, bright blood beating, life's flow deep and swift, a kingdom of joy and awe for us to dwell in. Oh, be glad for eye and tongue to see and taste the common of our days. Indeed, you might want to take a look at Walt Whitman's poem Miracles if you're not familiar with it. Walt Whitman, Miracles. Wonderful and wondrous poem. singular truth. There is then nothing but miracle. But as I did refer earlier today, all of us are dualists. Ordinary and extraordinary are the categories in which we live. I'm going to give you an example of the extraordinary for me. I'm among the first generation to be present at the birth of their child. You know? And it never failed that when a healthy baby was born, the father would walk out of the labor and delivery room and say, "Oh my God, I've just been part of a miracle." Right? What's happened? What's changed? The universe is still as ambiguous as it was before that moment, but what's changed is that person's awareness, that person's, to use the cliche word of our time, mindfulness. But how might we abide a little longer in that mindfulness of astonishment, especially at 2 a.m. when the diaper's full, right? That's the real challenge of spirituality. But we somehow can and ought to make that possible. Story from Zen tradition. Got to skip that. I'm going to go ahead. All right. My two students of different masters are debating the quality of their master. And the one student says, "My master works great miracles. I stand on one side of the Arkansas River, and he stands on the other side." I'm adding that part. He draws in the air, and images appear on my stylus, on my tablet. The other student says, "My master makes far greater miracles than these. When he works, he works. When he sleeps, he sleeps. When he meditates, he meditates." Some of us are old enough to remember Professor Leo Buscaglia. Used to call himself the Professor of Love. He was a fixture of PBS fundraisers. And he tells a story about himself when he was visiting Japan, and he was being escorted by a great master of Zen tradition through one of the most important gardens of Zen tradition. And Buscaglia, whom if you know something about him, he could hardly contain himself in his own skin. He was so filled with enthusiasm. Great word, to be full of God, enthusiasmos. And Buscaglia says, "Oh, look at that! Oh, look at that! Oh, oh, oh!" Even better than the Kaiser garden you showed me. Yeah. Oh. And the Zen master says nothing until this point, until finally he turns around and slaps Buscaglia across the face and says, "Will you stop walking with your dirty feet in my mind?" There'll be more than enough time to analyze the experience, because one of the things we confuse regularly is we think a critical insight is wisdom, as opposed to living in the experience that embraces us with the wonder that is always there, but we're not always present to. I think that's among the reasons why this poem, and I'd give $1.95 if anybody can guess who wrote it, and it's not I. You do not have to leave the room. Remain standing at your table and listen. Do not even listen. Simply wait. Be quite still and solitary. The world will freely offer itself to you to be unmasked. It has no choice. It will roll in ecstasy at your feet. Anybody want to guess? Franz Kafka. Can you believe that? Those of us who know anything about what? Amazing. And so the obvious question, what gets in the way? And if only we had time for unpacking of all this. I'm going to give real quick. Business and busyness. We are far more expert at making a living than we are at making a life. That is all too clear in the American experience, especially because our principal religion is not Christianity, it's materialism. It's the sure and certain falsehood that happiness comes from things, just acquiring more things, especially more things than the other guy or gal. Second, we are addicted to the quick fix. Jim Morrison, I want the world and I want it now. I mean, I did 20 minutes of abdominal work. Why don't I have a six-pack? I meditated once. How come no enlightenment? My goodness gracious. A New Yorker cartoon. Two people are at the beach enjoying adult beverages, and one of them says to the other, "This is perfect. I could stay like this for the next 5 seconds." But much, much deeper, there's a lack of comfortability in our own skins. That's probably more than anything else the great obstacle that gets in our insight. St. Augustine, in a long list of efforts to try to deflect this challenge, concludes that with, "Where could I go, yet leave myself behind? It's a long pedigree, after all. We talked about Cain and being a ceaseless wanderer the other day. Groucho Marx put it brilliantly. I wouldn't want to be a member of a club that would have me as a member. Yeah. I got to skip a little. Why then engage, since it's so tough? Let's suggest this. The Bible says the reason to do this is so that your days will be long upon the earth. Now, notice it doesn't say so that you're going to live a long life. We all know there's no formula that make guarantees, but that your days will be long upon the earth. That is to say, the 24-hourness of whatever portion is assigned to you or me will be more filled with life, with awareness, with an embrace of the holy joy of being for that brief moment before eternity that we are. I learned this lesson de profundis from my dad. My father died when I was 18. He knew he was going to die, cancer. They told him he had 6 months to live. He lived for 2.5 years. He set out for me to learn what I consider the most important lessons I've learned and hope to live as an adult. Rather than the obvious conclusion, life can't be trusted. What's the point of loving someone? All you're going to do is lose them. He taught me the following, 4 items. 1, the gift of life is incredibly fragile. Needs no elaboration, self-evident, right? 2, were I to die today, I want more. I am so intoxicated with the gift of life, to put it in Ed and St. Vincent Millay, oh, life, I cannot hold you close enough. 3, were I to die, I'm absolutely serious about this. Were I to die today, it would be enough to say the gift of life was worth it. I want more, but if this is all I get, thank you, thank you, thank you. Lesson number 4, I'd rather have my father than have learned any of it. I can't have that, but I can have what his life still means in me. Or as Jacob says, I will not let you go until you bless me. I did not want this to happen, but what in the world is the blessing that I can come out of this? So just 2 little things, and then I'll pretend I did stuff. I mentioned poets who, by the way, poems only work because they connect to what we know inchoate in ourselves. It just gives words, language, symbol system to what is in there. That's when a poem really connects. Robert Frost tells a story. Actually, the story is told about Robert Frost. A graduate student was with him one evening at his cottage in Vermont. I have no idea whether he had a cottage in Vermont or not. It's just a good story. And they're having dinner. And the graduate student is overcome by the beauty of the sunset. And she says to Dr. Frost, oh, Dr. Frost, isn't that exquisite? Frost supposedly responded, listen, I make it a point never to discuss work when I'm eating. But deeper, deeper. If you know this poem, and I hope you do, pretend you're hearing it for the first time again. E. Cummings, I thank you most. But among the things that's exquisite about this poem is, he was known for not using capitals, but God in this poem, he did capitalize. He also used some parentheses, which are remarkable. I thank you, God, for most this amazing day, for the leaping greenly spirit of trees, and a blue true dream of sky, and for everything which is natural, which is infinite, which is yes. I who have died am alive again today. And this is the Son's birthday. This is the birthday of life and of love and wings and of the gay, great happening, illimitably earth. How should tasting, touching, hearing, seeing, breathing, any lifted from the know of all nothing, human merely being, doubt unimaginable you? Now the ears of my ears are awake, and the eyes of my eyes are opened. Heschel once put, who lit the fire before our eyes, and who lit the fire of our eyes? Last poem excerpt. If you're not familiar with Mary Oliver, you owe it to yourself to make yourself acquainted with her. In a lengthy poem called When Death Comes, she concludes in this fashion. When it's over, I want to say, all my life, I was a bride married to amazement. I was the bridegroom, taking the world into my arms. When it's over, I don't want to wonder if I've made of my life something particular and real. I don't want to simply having ended up visiting this world. To be continued. Uh,
5:59. You're good. Let's take just a couple of minutes if anybody has a question or two before we have cookies and punch in the hall.
Cookies and punch? No,
Maybe it's time for cookies.
no, seriously, I'd be delighted if questions, pushback, concerns, alternative speeches. That's up to the agent. She's shopping it, and I got my first rejection letter the other day. It was an absolutely beautiful letter. I read. It was the senior editor of this particular publishing house. I read the manuscript. I loved it. I shared it with other colleagues, but it doesn't fit in our. There's a word they use for the particular focus of their. We just couldn't do it justice that it deserves, and it deserves to see the light of day. Thank a lot. Yeah. Yeah. We'll see. I'm hoping. My title was Miracles of the Ordinary, A Journey to Everyday Spirituality. Now, notice it's a journey. It's not a destination. But my book agent changed the title, Hiding in Plain Sight, A Journey to Everyday Spirituality. So, listen, what am I going to do? Yeah. There was a hand. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Thank you. Yeah. The horse is buried there?
Little known details. On that, I think it might be time to have cookies and punch.
Let's have a Boston Avenue pilgrimage.
Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock right here, we'll talk about folklore and stories from around the world and how we tell the same stories and what values those have and what it can teach us about ourselves. So I hope you'll be back.